Daniel Harris, good morning to you.
Hello.
This is a really interesting time. We were just talking about this a little bit earlier on. This is a really interesting time in the history of England as a country, and I hope so. This is off the back of we've been talking about what's in the papers, and Stan Collingwood's written today that he expects the outrage about racism to die away because it always does. It does feel like there's an opportunity for people to have a proper conversation about this now and start hopefully bringing this into mainstream discussion a bit more and calling out the newspapers and the grotesque treatment of young black people in the media and generally in life in England at the moment. Now, I don't know if it's right to be hopeful that that might happen, but certainly this seems like something that we should be talking about again and again and again and again.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's always fair to be hopeful, but at the same time, we have to be realistic. And I think it was just last week or the week before, we saw the tabloids going for Meghan Markle with all the usual coded language you would expect, accusing her of being direct, accusing her of making Kate cry, accusing her of being too demanding about all the things that she wanted for her wedding. Now, Meghan Markle is someone who, I guess, is not as black as Raheem Sterling, is someone who is married into the royal family, is someone who's an actress rather than a football player, so not considered to be fair game in quite the same way. And yet the papers still went for her. She's not secure. She's not protected from this kind of ridiculousness. So it's unsurprising that we see Raheem Sterling get it. And it means that I don't feel exactly hopeful because we're seeing it going on in circles above what a footballer is considered to be. So, but I agree that, I mean, I guess I wouldn't say I was pleased that Raheem Sterling spoke out in the sense that it's none of my business to be happy, pleased, unhappy, or to judge in any way how Raheem Sterling chooses to deal with all of this. But the fact that he did speak means that people are forced to confront it and forced to talk about it in some small way. And I guess it's a bit like Brexit in a way, where you find all the worst people are on one side, whether they're right or whether they're wrong, and whether there are arguments beyond the things that they say. Anyone who thinks that Raheem Sterling is not suffering racism, the person that you need to listen to about Raheem Sterling's racism is not Raheem Sterling, but is someone who is white, like Piers Morgan say. All the wrong people are on the wrong side of this, and that is the same with Brexit, which reflects the same fears of the other and the same the same wishes for an idealised past that never existed, and all these other appalling things that are ruining our country and have ruined it for a long time. And in the end, I think it all comes back to empire. People that think empire was a good thing are still in the majority, and that is why we're still seeing these kind of biases infect our society today.
Yeah, I know being pleased or whatever, but it's possible to be very impressed by how Raheem Sterling chose to respond to the specific incident of racism by pointing out that this is endemic in British society. He could have treated that any specific way, but he actually had this very specific example which it is impossible to ignore. And that's the type of thing that when it's presented in such a cold and brilliant argument the way he does on Instagram, that I think that moves the conversation beyond Raheem Sterling is annoyed by racism to Raheem Sterling has taken this calmly and rationally and gone, well, you know what, I think this guy is a function and a product of his environment, and that environment at the moment is toxic, particularly if you're a young, black, successful person, even if you're unsuccessful. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I agree. He did a great job, and by choosing a very specific example, it means that people are forced to think about that very specific thing. There'll always be people that will find a way of saying, well, it was like this for this white person, as though that somehow makes it all right and means that this particular thing against this black person does not constitute racism. But the thing about Raheem Sterling is he hasn't actually done anything wrong. And we see when he goes to play football, the stick that he gets from almost everyone. So Raheem Sterling left Liverpool. Why did he leave Liverpool? He left Liverpool to go and play for a better team to earn more money. More or less anyone in the world of work has done something similar to that. They've had a job that they liked where then people might have been nice to them, and they picked a better job because it's better for them, it's better for their family. But even if it isn't, no one has to explain their choices to anyone. He wanted to do it, so he wanted to work somewhere else, so he did. And yet, it is fine in the way that football operates for Liverpool supporters to give Raheem Sterling aggravation because he gave their club some level of aggravation. But what you see with Raheem Sterling is that he gets grief everywhere he goes. And if we look at history, traditionally, white folk have not always been entirely delighted for black folk to decide who they work for and for them to choose who they work for and then go and have money. And that is the problem with what Raheem Sterling has done, effectively. He's decided to take control of his own labour and make his own decisions and not allow other people to make them for him. And people are uncomfortable with that. And then you add on to that Raheem Sterling decides to have the haircuts that Raheem Sterling wants to have. And that is something else that people are uncomfortable with. And we see that also, for example, with the abuse that Paul Pogba gets. And an occasion when we really saw this in very stark detail was after England got beaten by Iceland in Euro 2014. The Euro 2014, Euro 2016. Roy Hodgson, the white man who was largely responsible for England's failure, and basically refused to answer any questions in the press conference when he was challenged as to why it had gone so badly, more or less escaped censure. But then if you looked at the tabloids, one after the other, Carl Walker, I think, went to Ibiza. Dele Alli enjoyed himself. Raheem Sterling bought some fancy taps for his mum. Harry Kane, nothing said. And it was very stark at that point that these are the things we need to confront. And it's not just a matter, as you said earlier, of confronting this particular circumstance of these particular footballers, but it's looking at the way this reflects our society. And if you just look at football, if you look in the press box at any football game, you will see that nearly everyone is white and nearly everyone is a man and nearly everyone is able-bodied. You'll see all of those things. Then if you widen it slightly and you look to the boardrooms of our biggest companies, you will see the same thing. And then if you look at politics, you will see the same thing. And I mean, if you just, for example, look at the cabinet, you will see that almost the majority of people are white. If you look at the shadow cabinet, the majority of people are white. And then you think for a second about the fact that Barack Obama was the president in America, and you look at the problems with race that America still has, despite the fact that they were prepared to elect a black president. We haven't even done that yet, and we also have similar issues. And it's very hard to see how these issues are got beyond when we just see all these different examples of it over and over again. And the fact is that people who have never experienced this find it much harder to appreciate that it's going on, because appreciating that it's going on means they have to confront the privilege of their own lives. And so all the things that they have, that they think they have simply on merit and on account of all the wonderful things that they have done and all the wonderful things that they are, rather than this historic white supremacy and this historic preference for the colour of their skin. People don't want to confront that because it means confronting the story of their own lives and the lies that they have told themselves and been told to justify all the things that they have.
Yeah, we're obviously all complicit in that. But I do think that that's why this particular moment, I hope, is a bit where we realise that there's quite a lot at stake. Like, what's going on in England, what's going on in America, what's happening with Brexit, like the fundamental institutions of our democracy across Europe are threatened. And unless people like Raheem Sterling get the support from the public that actually really agree with him, and that unless they kind of rally behind him, then we could all sit around and look back in 20 years' time and go, geez, we really kind of had that opportunity there to, you know, stand up to the growth of fascism, and we didn't take it. We decided to concentrate on just the football instead of listening to what some of the footballers were telling us.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's the lesson of all this, is that whenever we see anything like this, we're all obliged to call it out, however uncomfortable it makes us feel and however difficult it is. And I say this not as some kind of paragon myself, but I understand, like, it's really difficult to call things out. It's really difficult to confront the privilege that you yourself have benefited from. But we can see the way that things are going at the moment. There are populist movements that have issues to do with race. I mean, it's not just in Great Britain. It's not just in America. It's in Israel. It's in India. It's in numerous other countries around the world. It's in the Czech Republic. It's in Poland. All these places, and I don't purport to entirely understand the politics of all these places, but I can see when the same things are being said in the same ways, and that's a problem. And it always follows, usually not always follows, but it almost always follows economic difficulty when these things are amplified. because people are looking for people to blame. And who are the easiest people to blame? New people, people that look different, people that sound different. And all these old hatreds come to the fore. And that's why, as I say, I'm happy that Raheem Sterling has done what he's done. I'm happy that he did it in such a rational, reasoned way, though I had no reason to expect him to do anything other than that. And we're obliged, those of us in the media and those of us with whatever small platform we have, to talk about it. And also not just people with a platform, but people who encounter it in their everyday lives. And I think the main thing that we have to all think about is that we need to listen, because people that don't experience these things don't understand what it is, don't understand how it feels. So when Raheem Sterling tells you that this is the situation, it's not acceptable for white people really to have a line on this. All you do is you listen and you learn and you think and you resolve to do better yourself wherever you can, rather than saying, well, perhaps what about this that happened to that white person is not relevant. We're talking about this particular situation right here and right now. And we listen to people that we think, that we understand, have expertise in how these things feel and how these things work. And we listen and we learn, and then we act differently in the future.
Stan Collymore this morning is saying that the UK's outrage over racism will pass. Do you think that this is going to be the start of something, or that it will fizzle out like Collymore says? Or do you think that potentially down the road this could be the start of something not too similar, but kind of similar in theory to the likes of what Colin Kaepernick did in the NFL, accepting as well the idea that, let's face it, the NFL problem that some of the NFL players were addressing was, you could say, not an NFL problem at all. It was very much in the streets of the United States, whereas this is a nationwide problem which has very much manifested itself in Premier League grounds. So you could say there's almost a greater cause and a greater reason for some sort of protest like that. I may be getting way ahead of myself, but it is initially where my head goes when I think of something like this.
I don't think that addressing the issue in football is particularly difficult, because it's quite obvious, and there's much less racism in football than there was. And so it's not necessarily difficult to address the issue in football, but in terms of addressing the wider issue, we're talking about huge structural issues with regard to how society works. And that is a lot of work. That is a huge amount of work that, if I'm honest, I would be surprised if it got done in our lifetimes. But it doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't be striving to make a better world and make a fairer world. So I wouldn't necessarily say that I think Raheem Sterling's situation will serve as a springboard for us to cure the ills of our society, just because the ills of our society are so historical and so deep-seated and so beneficial to so many people who will seek to protect them, that that's not something that is going to get done on account of Raheem Sterling. That's something that we have to do, and it's something that we have to do, and then people in power have to actually do something about it. I think that it's possible that newspapers like the Mail and the Sun will change their ways at some point, because financially it might become better for them to do that. There might be some regulation, but the same biases will exist in society, and that is a very, very big job. So hopefully we're looking at tackling it, but we're not anywhere near resolving it. And I don't think we'll be anywhere near resolving it in 50 years' time either.